Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr, and welcome back to something I like to call Stories from the Maelstrom, a recap of the day's games for this past week of real time. It was a pretty exciting day in the Baseball Maelstrom universe, so let's take a look at the games from May 13th. First of all, we had another rain postponement. At Fenway again. This is the second time Fenway has been rained out. I think they even had one game shortened because of rain. Boston has been involved in several rainouts or postponements. These teams will play a doubleheader tomorrow. Boston Splinters facing off against the Oakland Jacks tomorrow at Fenway Park. Splinters are just a game behind the Detroit Rockets in the American League. And the Jacks are 16-19. The American League's pretty tight race overall. Heading over to L.A., Houston Hoots coming to Los Angeles to see if they could break that winning streak, and they could not. However, the game was not without its drama. Tom Seaver coming off of a game in which he faced off against Juan Marichal, and they both pitched I think over 11 innings apiece. Wasn't as sharp in this one. Facing off against Pete Alexander. Pete Alexander actually was great. He was outstanding in this one. He went 8 innings, allowed just 1 earned run. That was a home run to Mike Schmidt here in the 5th, and only 6 hits. He did walk 5 and only struck out 3, but overall a great performance from Pete. And Houston, as I said, Tom Seaver not quite as sharp. He allowed 5 runs. Most of those, he allowed 1 run in the 3rd. Eddie Matthews had an RBI single there. He allowed a couple of runs in the 4th after the bases got loaded up. And then there were a couple of ground outs that scored a couple of runs there. And then there was a 2-run double by Ernie Lombardi there in the 5th to give LA 5 runs. They were up 5-1 at that point. Rube Marquard, who has not been a great pitcher this year for Houston, actually came in the 8th. They were already down 5-1 at that point. So they figured it was probably safe to use him here. And he allowed 4 more runs thanks to an Eddie Matthews grand slam with 2 outs. He almost got out of that inning after loading the bases, striking out Joe Morgan and Cristobal Torriente, but couldn't do it. And Eddie Matthews hit a grand slam here to put LA up 9-1. Tom Glavine, who has been pretty lights out this year, Glavine had allowed a couple of runs in his first appearance. He's been in relief for the Dynamos. Hadn't allowed a run in, I think, 17 innings, his last 17 innings, dating back to like one of the first games of the year, I think April 3rd. So the 3rd game of the year, 3rd day of the year. Has been pretty unhittable. However, he did not have a good time of it in this one against Houston in relief. Willie Stargell led off with a home run, a solo shot. Stargell had walked in his 3 prior at-bats, which was pretty interesting, but Stargell hit a solo shot to lead off the 9th against Glavine. Pop Lloyd had a single and stole second. Jeff Bagwell walked, and then Billy Williams hit a 3-run homer against Glavine. Now, Glavine did strike out Duke Snyder, but then Ryan Sandberg singled, and then Gary Carter hit another home run against Glavine. So Glavine allowed 3 homers that inning and 6 runs. Very uncharacteristic of him. It speaks volumes that his ERA only rose to 4.08 after that 3rd of an inning, 6 earned runs. But then Goose Gossage came in. After those 6 runs, the game was 9-7. So Houston was feeling the pressure there, LA was feeling the pressure there not to blow this one. And then Goose Gossage came in and made things even more interesting by walking the first 2 batters he faced, Hank Aaron and Mike Schmidt, before he got Willie Stargell to ground out and then struck out Pop Lloyd looking to end the game. Gossage gets his 9th save. They get out of this one, scraping by, but it's good enough for them to win their 8th straight game. Houston had played the spoiler a little bit, beating the St. Louis Wizards, I think 3 out of 4. But they came to LA, and LA is not having any of it. Heading over to New York, where the Detroit Rockets are taking on the New York Swats. And Walter Johnson had a great start in this one for New York. New York, with the worst record in the American League, facing off against Detroit, who has the top record in the American League. And Walter Johnson allowed just 4 hits and 2 runs. Both of those, actually, one of those runs came in the first inning. There was a solo home run by Adrian Beltre in the 6th. So Johnson had a kind of a rough first inning here. He allowed a couple of singles. Kenny Lofton singled and stole second. Ichiro extended his hitting streak to, I believe, 24 games with a single, an RBI single there. He walked Alex Rodriguez before he was able to get 3 outs to get out of that inning. But after that, it was smooth sailing, except for that solo shot, as I mentioned, in the 6th. But overall, he struck out 11. He did walk 4, but only allowed 4 hits and 2 runs. Problem was, Brett Saberhagen had an even better pitching performance. At least his stat line says so. But it didn't feel like that as the game was going on. The only run Saberhagen allowed was a solo home run to Lou Boudreau in the first inning. That being said, New York had they left 12 guys on base, 12 batters on 12 runners on base, excuse me. And so you can see here in the 3rd, even they had runners on 1st and 3rd with 1 out. And Saberhagen was able to get out of that one by striking out Ken Griffey Jr. and getting Jimmy Fox to ground out. They had runners, the bases loaded in the 5th with 2 outs. Jimmy Fox grounded out there to end that inning. And then in the 7th, they had runners on 2nd and 3rd with 2 outs. And Jimmy Fox made the final out in the inning 4 times this game. So he did not have a very good game. And unfortunately, pretty much every one of those times there were runners on base that were in many times in a position to score, but they just couldn't get it done to get another run. So Detroit, even though they got out hit 10 hits to 4 in this game, they are victorious. They win 2-1. Saberhagen gets his 7th win, which leads the American League. And Tom Henke gets another save, his 9th of the year in this one. New York falls to 16-22, whereas Detroit improves to 22-16. Heading over to St. Louis, as the Chicago Docs, last place in the National League, face the St. Louis Wizards, who I mentioned before have been struggling in the second half of the season. LA, coming into this game, LA was just a game behind the Wizards. However, Chicago has been in the midst of a losing streak, and they drop another one here. Rick Russell for the Docs had a big inning in the first. He allowed 6 runs. Only 3 of those were earned, though. Larry Walker hit a 3-run homer there in the first. And then a couple of errors, one by Troy Tulowitzki and one by Albert Pujols, kind of let the inning get away from the Docs, as they scored 3 more unearned runs in the first inning and batted around. St. Louis batted around on them. Those would be the only 6 runs that the Wizards would get, and the only 6 runs they would need, actually. Juan Marichal, also coming off of that 11-plus inning performance in his last start. He goes 8 innings for the Wizards, allowing just 3 runs on 8 hits, striking out 5. One of those runs was a Jim Edmonds RBI single in the 4th, and then Barry Bonds hit a double in the 5th to score 2 to give Chicago their 3 runs, and 3 runs on 9 hits. But those 2 errors were pretty costly, as was that 3-run shot to Larry Walker. But overall, Russell actually didn't do too bad, but he does get the loss here. Juan Marichal gets the win. Bruce Sutter comes in the 9th for his 10th save of the season. And St. Louis takes this one 6-3 to improve to 25-13 and to get their lead over the Dynamos up by another half game. The Docs have now lost 6 straight. They fall to 11-27. They're kind of in free fall right now. Can't seem to get things together to win here in this. Mostly in the second half, but pretty much all season they've been struggling. I think both of these teams do get a day off after today. Let's head over to, if we take a look at the standings first, we see that Detroit has a 1.5 game lead on Boston. They're in the American League. But again, only 6 games separate first and last place there in the American League. Meanwhile, in the National League, St. Louis gets back up a 1.5 games over LA. But LA has won their last 8 games and 9 of their last 10 to get here within striking distance of the Wizards. Chicago, 14 games back of first place, and they're really running out of any time to make up that distance. It'd be pretty miraculous if they did. Next up, we have that doubleheader between Oakland and Boston at Fenway Park, and the Houston Hoots taking on the LA Dynamos in LA. That's another short day coming up in the league. If you want to check out the stats, head over to baseballmaelstrom.com to check out all the stats, a little write-up on each game, the players, and all of that fun stuff. You can revisit the All-Star game that took place earlier in the season. And we are we're about a third of the way through the second half of the season. Teams are playing a 54-game season, and so 38 games. Most teams have played 38 games of the 54. So we're getting down to it here in the second half, but still quite a bit of time left. So anything could happen, especially in the American League. And in the National League, between LA and St. Louis, there's quite a race going on there too. So nobody's out of it yet there. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If there's anything you'd like to see, leave a comment down below. If you like these recaps, be sure to click the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. The next video I put up will probably be one of my analysis of MLB data. Of course, all of this takes place. My solo league at least takes place in using Payoff Pitch. So I did a recent interview with Joe Bryan, the creator of Payoff Pitch, and some other games with sideline strategy games. So you can head over to Sideline Strategy Games if you want to see Payoff Pitch and the bank shot basketball that's going to be coming out here pretty shortly too. Anyway, that's where we'll leave things. Until next time, thank you so much for watching and have a great evening.